Hello. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Kaylina and this is the Fox's Hideaway, and today I've got a book review / discussion on one of my absolute favorite topics to talk about, which is spirits and spirit communication and just the spirit realm in general. So let's get started. Alright, so I've been trying to catch up on books recently, and I didn't even grab the book that I'm talking about today, which is, I'll just put a picture up here somewhere, Unquiet Voices, new book that just came out. Absolutely loved it. It was so good, and just wrote a crap ton of notes about it and just want to kind of have a discussion about it because I love talking anything spirits. In other regards, I have been on a reading spree trying to finish up some books that I had in the works. I had literally like 5 books that I was reading at one time, and I was like, you know what? Nope, we need to close some of these guys out. That way we could actually, I don't know, discuss them and have videos about them and then move on to whatever we're going to read now. So I finished A History of Witchcraft in England from 1558 to 1718. That's what this book looks like. And yes, it is exactly what you would think, a history book of witchcraft from that time. And although I personally find it super helpful because I'm trying to learn about witchcraft and for my book, the normal person maybe wouldn't want to read this huge long biography of witchcraft because it's somewhat redundant a little bit, just because you find out very quickly how petty and kind of ridiculous, and I'm not in the sense that the witch trials was obviously a very serious thing that happened. You know, tons of innocent people died from it, so not ridiculous in that manner, but ridiculous in the fact that it was so petty half the time for whatever these people were accused of. You know, you just simply didn't like your neighbor, so all of a sudden you accuse them of these outlandish things, and next thing you know, they're being hung from a tree. So it's like, it's just crazy reading throughout history, and for how long these witch trials lasted in England and in other countries. You know, I'm most familiar with the Salem witch trials, but that was absolutely nothing, and that was like a sliver of what happened, you know, in other European countries. So it was really interesting reading about that. As far as recommending it, if you love history and you want a deep dive into kind of what the witchcraft trials were and some of the more significant trials, go for it. You'll probably like it, but it is very bland, is very straight to the point. Like, why can't comedians write history books? Put all the knowledge and all the stuff that we need to know, but do it in a comedic manner. I mean, you would have kids loving school, but that's beside the point. I also finally finished Between Heaven and Earth, A Guide to Chinese Medicine by Harriet Benfield, LAC, and Ephraim Korngold, LAC, and OMD. This book was really interesting. Oh my gosh. And I remembered liking it when I first picked it up and started reading it too. I have a part 1 video somewhere. And obviously I am not like this vast knowledge of Chinese medicine by any means. I have some knowledge just because we learned some in massage school, but by no means an expert. So obviously read from the experts. But I would like to make a part 2 just talking about some of the basic Chinese medicine if you have an interest in it, because it is so fascinating and it's so deep and there's so many layers to it, so it's impossible to learn it all from one book. But this book definitely did a really good job going into detail, and I am one of those people that I personally don't like beginner books, even if I'm just new to a subject, because I like meat of substance, and if it's just the basic, I don't know, knowledge, I don't like it. I like having to challenge my brain. And so this book is I don't know if this is considered a beginner's book or not. I would probably guess and say no. But if you're interested in Chinese medicine, I definitely highly recommend this. And I would like to make a part 2 of that video at some point. But like I said, to even do it any sort of justice, you really have to have your notes composed, and like it's something you study for years and years and years. You don't just necessarily pick up one day and all of a sudden start practicing it. Like you might take tidbits from it, but I would love to hone in more on what I am within the Chinese medicine realm and implement more things into my daily life. But like I said, by no means an expert. Now, the other book that I finally finished that I got right before I went to Texas was Magic of Reiki by Christopher Pegzak. Sorry. Still have a bit of a cough. This book I really enjoyed too, because it combined two things that I absolutely love, which is Reiki and magic. And to see these two combined together was really interesting. And I definitely want to do like an actual video about this book too, because more of a deep dive, because I connected a lot with this book. Like and it's so funny because like I'm one of those people, because I am in the witchy realm and I am in like the healing realm, I tend to just naturally smush things together, and I don't know, I term a lot of things witchy and a lot of things like magical, even if they're not technically, but like to me it's all kind of in the same realm. So to me, I say a lot of things are witchy, and like I realize that not everybody that is in that realm identifies as a witch, and so I should probably learn to stop doing that. But I'm just like, to me, crystals are witchy. So even if you don't necessarily practice witchcraft, I'm still that person that's calling you witchy. So I'm sorry if that's like not what you want to be identified as. But to me, it's just so natural. Like it all just fits so well together, and I practice all of it. So if it bothers anybody, please let me know and I will try to do better. But I feel like he did a great job with talking about how magic and Reiki do go hand in hand together, Yes, they're different in a lot of ways, but they're also very similar and they work very well together. So I will be looking forward to making a more in-depth video on that. But today we're talking about Unquiet Voices and having a long-ass discussion about spirits, because this is going to be a long video. I'm just apologizing ahead of time, so just put me on in the background while you're doing chores, or listen to me podcast style, because we are going to dive into this. So what I loved about this book is that, and I can attest to everybody, because I know there are people in the Western world that make it their job to investigate spirits and to understand them. And so I'm not saying this in regards to everybody, but in my experience, I run into a lot of the YouTube investigators who are going out and doing ghost hunts. And while I'm not validating them, because there are some very good channels out there that I feel like try to be very true and legit to what the spirit realm really is, and what they can do and what they can't do, and sharing real information. There are some out there that completely picture it in a realm that is just not realistic and not what it is most of the time. Can't say that for everybody in the West, but I feel like in general, other places in the world are very in tune to spirit. They're very they just grow up in the culture of understanding that there are other things out there besides us, and they just grow up alongside these beliefs and this respect towards the undead and the spirit realm and other entities that are among us. While here, I feel like it's our knowledge is not so deep. You know, we're still very much at the beginning levels of really deeply understanding spirit. But this book, like, you can tell these authors have been in this realm for a long time. Like, they know their stuff. They have worked with many different spirits, and mainly this is all about like human spirits that have passed on, not, you know, land spirits or other entities or anything like that. This focuses on human spirits that passed on and the different levels of them that you're going to run into. But this book just cleans everything up. Like, it gives you this very clear reality of what working with spirits is, and like breaks it down to like the true understanding of how a spirit is formed, how it communicates with us, and like I'm trying to think of how I want to word this. It's very like in detail and in depth, and like the behind the scenes stuff, the behind the scenes knowledge that a lot of people don't give you, especially a lot of these YouTube people. For instance, if you asked one of these channels what phasma was, they probably would have absolutely no clue what you're talking about. And so it's just distinguishing the people that do ghost hunting, like, not necessarily just for entertainment. I mean, some of them are really trying to understand spirits, but they don't understand the in-depth detail behind it, if that makes sense. Versus when you get people in the spiritual realm that have really been studying it for a long time and interacting with them and like truly, truly studying them, you get more of a deeper understanding. It's not so surface level, if that makes sense. And it's not to like say anything bad about, you know, people that are just going out and ghost hunting. It's just, there's a deeper understanding, and I find that to be really helpful, especially when you're trying to help inform people what spirit really is, because there's just so much misconception and so much fear behind working with spirits or even coming in contact with them, that it's a very misunderstood realm. So yeah, and yeah, that's kind of the first part that I just wanted to mention, because a lot of the time there's just a lot of mistreatment when it comes to the spirit realm, and yeah, it's just, some things are just incredibly unrealistic. And I especially do not like when people are misconstruing them as just very dark and evil and scary, and because most of the time that is not the case. Yes, there are things out there that can hurt you. Yes, there are things out there that if you make agreements with them, even if you don't realize you made an agreement, yeah, they can be a bit frightening, and some of them can appear really scary. But you also just, the fear, the fear-mongering actually makes it just so much worse, because that's what feeds them, is fear. And by making agreements, fear is an agreement, essentially. So if you're fearful of it, you are then feeding it energy that it can use against you. So by continually shoving all this content out there, and even horror movies, which I love myself a good horror movie, so I'm not like saying that, but for instance, like, we had our soft opening for our new store yesterday, and we had somebody come in, and it, you know, he was looking at the tarot cards, and then he mentioned how he saw that new tarot movie that, of course, is a horror movie based on tarot cards, which has no realism or real basis whatsoever, even though I haven't seen it, like, but I get the gist, you know, and it's just continuing that fear of something that is not that way, you know. So just, and I can appreciate movies on their own, but I definitely hope that there's enough content out there that's actually educating people on what it really is, so that they don't just automatically go into it fearing it. There's so much unknown. But that's enough of that rambling. So these authors are Scottish, and they call their work laying of ghosts. And so that is pretty much going in, helping these ghosts pass on, or helping to remove safely, for both parties, both the spirit and the people involved, the living, removing spirits and the different spirits that you're going to run into, which is really cool. And a comment that they made, which was kind of true, if you think about it, if you don't fear meeting a living person most of the time, then why do you fear the ones that have passed on? Most of the time, they are not going to be something to be scared of. Now, I'm talking human entities. I'm not talking about other entities. Other entities can be rather intimidating. They use the term revenant, which is a human spirit that has been bound to this in-between kind of space between our world and the next world for any number of reasons. A haunting occurs when that revenant fixates on like a person, place, or a thing, or some kind of reasoning for being here. So they talk about necromancy and how there are like two different kinds. You have necromancy, which is where you evoke a spirit from the dead. You call them into a very specific place to communicate with them and to figure out why they're there and why they aren't moving on. You can use tangible links to that spirit that's been deceased to bring them to you. And then there's scomancy, which is when you actually go to the place where the spirit is most active and conduct your investigation there. And that's usually a service that helps both the living and the dead. The other one can be more for just yourself and investigating spirits. They also mention the term demonology, which is not like demonology in the sense that a lot of people think of it, like dark, scary, from the Bible kind of demons, although the church definitely loves to demonize everything, regardless of if it's evil or not. But these are any kind of spirits of like the lower realm, so to speak. So this includes us. We're technically, human spirits are technically demons, so to speak. And what qualifies as that is that they have free will, they're immortal in a sense, and they may reincarnate at some point. We're neither good or bad, and we can help decide our own destiny. So obviously in many other practices, including like paganism and other cultures and practices, work with spirits right along. Like if you're in this kind of realm, it is not uncommon for you to run into spirits or to even work with them. Not everybody does, obviously, but it's not uncommon to see that happen. And so we'll make agreements with certain spirits, depending on who they are, to accomplish different things. We'll give offerings in, replacement for helping with the job that we're hoping to get, or, aligning our destiny in the path that, we should be on. Just different reasons. By the 12th century, demons were definitely demonized by the church. Like, there was no ifs and buts about it. If it wasn't God and, pretty much angels and saints, it was demonized and considered bad and honestly considered a sin. So they definitely had their terminology, which would not be appropriate today. It was all about the black and dark arts and all that kind of stuff, which is not relevant or not how we, refer to it today. And it was always considered a very nefarious nature, full of like devilish themes and bad intentions, pretty much, which obviously is not the case at all. Not the case at all. So yeah, between that, you had the two divisions. You had like the pagans who were still very much intertwined with the spirit realm in the way in which you should be, where you have a very respectful connection between them and us. And then you had the people that were pretty much trying to control the spirit realm somewhat in the name of God. And so this was almost forcing spirits to do things. This could sometimes involve binding spirits and just the very negative things that you don't want to do when you're interacting with the spirit realm. Because guess what? There's kind of a reason spirits and other entities don't exactly love humans. We haven't exactly been nice to them or respectful in the past. And so there is definitely a level of tension and suspicion between certain spirits, not all of them, but some of them. And so, yeah, we have a lot of, I feel like, healing to do with the spirit realm. So they talk about, obviously, if you're wanting to go into this kind of work, developing your clairsenses. Obviously, it's very helpful if you can see and hear spirits when doing this kind of job. But as I always say, everyone has different clairsenses. So if you're wanting to develop them and working with spirits, just start tuning in and seeing how they interact with you. Most of the time, what I run into with human spirits is very subtle. It's synchronicities, it's numbers, it's symbols, yeah, they can sometimes talk to you. You can see them in light anomalies, and they can sometimes obviously manifest when the conditions are right, which we'll talk more about in a minute here. But they're usually pretty subtle, like the low-key. Now, non-human entities, as of what I've learned of literally very recently, they're a whole other deal. And in fact, we're kind of dealing with something that is incredibly powerful. We believe it's some kind of land spirit, because elementals are surrounding it, and it is like energy I have never ever felt before, and incredibly powerful, incredibly intimidating, and pretty much just drains the energy right out of you. Full head to body, like head to toe tingling sensation, this very heavy weightedness, and like the sticky, cobwebby feel. And on video cameras, you can literally see orbs flying everywhere to such an extreme I've never seen before. And part of me, the side that loves to investigate spirit activity and investigate this kind of stuff, is a little bit like a kid in a candy shop, just because it's just one more experience. On the other hand, the energy is very intense, and yeah. I'm not going into detail in regards to who all is involved and stuff, just out of privacy, but yeah, I've definitely never experienced... I've experienced land spirits and guardians in the concept of like cemeteries, you know, where you go and you just can feel a strong presence, but it's not like in your face unless it needs to be. It's just like you can tell that there is something there watching over everything and just making sure people are being respectful. But this energy is an energy that is not happy with us, and so I'm like, okay, all right, this is not exactly in my wheelhouse, but yeah, that's kind of all I'm gonna go into it right now. But whew, different level for sure. So the next part, just briefly mentioned, there's a term Arvetres, which is like tested and proven magic that they use time and time again. It's accepted knowledge, it's like rites or magical philosophy that has been around for a really long time and is tested and proven. And then you have Ars Nova, which is like experiments that newer experiments, newer things that are in development, experimentation throughout time. It will turn into Ars Vetris if it is proven to be accurate time and time again. There's a lot of different definitions within this book that really define and the deeper meaning of such as like Heil. And that's like transformative substance of the universe, and it's associated with alchemical concept of prime material. And so all these other terminologies are important to the makeup of how spirits can get into our world and how they can kind of operate. There's different types of Heil. There's the ether, the Fuma, and the Phasma. And Phasma I'm going to probably throw around a lot because that's the one that is most closely tied to like spirits and how they can manifest. It's the densest level of Heil, and it has to be pretty much like perfect conditions for spirits to even be able to like manifest at all. So that's why a lot of times full body apparitions are, I would say, more on the rare side, because it takes the perfect conditions for a spirit to be powerful enough to be able to manifest. And not only that, they don't really get a lot of control. Like, they can't just on command manifest themselves. Like, they don't even really have that concept at that point to be like, yeah, we're manifesting now. It's not really how it works. Ether is the lightest of the Heil. It's the space between the atomic particles, and it's the greatest. And it's the essential nature of the numerous soul. And so it's the substance of souls, in basic words. So Fuma is balanced state of equilibrium that permits independent physicality of form in accordance with the laws of nature. The second or middle state of density is the world we inhabit as like incarnate human beings. So us as ourselves right now, that is like Fuma. And then Phasma, like I said, is the densest level. This is the underworld substance, so to speak. And it's moldable light. And it's very dense, and it can be sculpted into spirit. So you have a lot of different realms that I'll kind of mention later. But for now, we're going to move on. So there's a terminology called the metacosmos. Some of you may be familiar with that term. Some of you maybe not so much. I was familiar of the concept, just not the actual terminology. And so it's called the sea between realms. So it's pretty much the in-between space of our realm, our physical realm, and the spirit realm. And there's a term called Corth Argua. And this is known as like that really cold area in between. This is where the spirits tend to get a little bit stuck. Most of the time, the temperature is really cold here, and you tend to find that the spirits here are usually kind of in distress for one reason or another. They're attached to something from their previous life that they just haven't given up, either by choice or not by choice, and it's keeping them in a sort of purgatory. And I think this is where purgatory actually comes from. Not so much what a lot of, like, I grew up in a private school, a Catholic school, and that was a whole thing. And I don't necessarily believe in a lot of what they say in regards to purgatory and hell and all that kind of stuff. But they, of course, believe that purgatory is where you go, obviously, after you die, that you have to spend many, many years, possibly eons, to kind of make up for whatever wrong you did on Earth, so that eventually, maybe, if you're lucky, you get to heaven. I don't believe that. I believe purgatory is kind of like how they describe it, and it's, if your soul somehow gets stuck, then yeah, you could be there for a really long time until the natural process of dissolution happens, which is where the spirit slowly breaks down in that stage. And I can imagine it's not a very fun process because they lose who they are. They lose their humanity of what they once were until they literally just dissolve and are reincarnated back on their path. But that could take a long time. So you don't obviously want to become that. And they can get pretty dark. There's different levels of the breakdown, and the last one is larva, I believe, and they're unrecognizable. Like, you wouldn't even realize that they're human, and a lot of the times they get confused as something darker just because they're very confused, frazzled, kind of violent at that point. Like, it's just, you don't want to get stuck in that area. Sorry, like I said, I have a crap ton of notes, and I'm trying to just kind of talk about the most important things, because obviously I highly recommend this book, and it just goes through a lot of things that would be immensely helpful if you're interested in diving in depth into the spirit realm. So obviously they also talk about like the animus and the anima. Animus is a very logic and reason side of us. It's meant to analyze our experiences. It's all about like quantifying and quantifying things of our like just knowledge that we learn throughout our lifetime. It's your higher self. It's also known as like your guardian angel, or that like voice in your head, your higher self that's divinely connected. And your anima is like life force, and it is obsessed with staying alive and survival. It's all about the magic, life force, and emotions dwell here, and it's a little bit more unruly, and sometimes when people are about to pass away, that anima gets hold and just doesn't want to let go, which can sometimes cause spirits to get stuck too. So there is a difference between soul and spirit. I know sometimes those two words can be like intertwined and like switched around, but the spirit is what the soul goes into. So in Dean Winchester terms, it's our meat suit that we walk around in. The spirit is very temporary, and it has no sentience of its own. So that's why when you pass on, these spirits lose like their mind. They literally kind of lose their mind aspect. And so that's why a lot of the times when you interact with spirits, sometimes they can be very confused, and their thought process is a little bit disconnected and sometimes hard to understand because they don't have that part of their body anymore. So I think something that is kind of a misconception in the spirit realm, maybe not, is that they can manifest whenever they want. Like, they can just be like, appear and be like, hey, here I am. Not so much. They don't get to choose what stage of manifestation they come through. And most of the time, they kind of end up here by accident. They somehow drift into some kind of tear or rip in the veil, so to speak, and they end up in our world. Most of the time, it's very accidental and it's not purposeful. So like I said, there's different stages of manifestation. There's a noob, which is a cloud or a mist. It can be seen by the naked eye, but most likely through your third eye, which I do have. We do have at the Elms here and there. You'll like see just misty kind of energy that will hang out in a corner or something. It can be captured on film. The color determines what spirit is trying to manifest. Gray or silver indicate a human spirit. Then you have your Newman, which is an orb, self-lighting white rod or streak when moving. Then you have an Umbra, which is your dark silhouette or shadow person. They believe it's still only a human entity. So I know that there's a lot of talk around shadow people. There's so many different theories on shadow people, that they're aliens, that they're some kind of dark demon, that they're, regular people. They're not understood a lot. But from the author's perspective, they say shadow people are just humans that have passed on. They also say this is going to be like the most common that you're going to run into as well. So, and then you have your full apparition, which is very hard to get most of the time. They're translucent light, transparent, natural color, often seen in a reflective surface like a mirror or a window, which this was kind of chilling to me because they were talking about that and how when you see them through like a reflection, it's actually that they're like by you, that they're like next to you, and it's just the way that they're reflecting that it seems like they're in a window or they're in glass or something, but they're actually like closer to you than you think, which is a little bit chilly at times. I'm one of those people that, I don't know why, but mirrors unsettle me. And it's so ridiculous because you can easily lock mirrors and to prevent things from coming through. But I'm just one of those people, and I haven't even had like a bad experience with mirrors, but ever since I was younger and I heard the story Bloody Mary, which obviously that it's a ghost story, you know, not that I don't think that there could be vengeful spirits that come out of mirrors, but ever since I heard that story when I was younger, before I was even into all this stuff, mirrors have always just kind of freaked me out. I'm that person that goes to the bathroom in the middle of the night and I don't like to turn on lights, but I refuse to look in the mirror. Like, I'm weird like that. And my mirrors are protected and locked. In fact, I probably need to redo that at some point, just because I personally don't want to interact with things through mirrors. I'm just that weird human being. Apparitions are also the ones that appear by your bed in the middle of the night when you wake up and there's just that thing that's, you know, sitting there wringing their hands. That's an apparition, obviously. But they say that most of the time they are not trying to scare you, which was kind of relieving because for me personally, that is not how I want to experience a spirit. You're already in such a kind of vulnerable state when you're sleeping. There's obviously so many theories about that as well. I don't mind if you come to me through a dream. I don't mind that. But I do not want to wake up and that is the first thing I see is a real human or a dead human or any other entity right by my bed. Like, that's just not a good wake-up call for me personally. But it says they're not usually trying to scare you. They're just trying to communicate. And obviously communication is a lot harder once you get past the veil. And it's just not as clear and as easy to communicate as when we're alive. So there's different kinds of non-sentient spirits. So you have phantasm, which is like your residual hauntings in Western terms. It's just the echoes and impressions of something that somebody or some event that had happened before. It's just imprints. So vocal echoes or visions past, impressions on object or place. Phasmata is activity that has a sense of purpose, but it's not like super conscious. Activity caused by a thought form intelligence. Communication, if any, will be stilted and unresponsive. So illusions empowered by repetition, emotion, or popular belief, uncontrolled psychic intent, extreme emotion, thought form created by a magician like a servitor or a tulpa. I feel like poltergeists fall under this, but then they mention poltergeist a little bit later. So I also feel like this is what happens when those urban legends are created, when somebody just tells a story over and over and over and over again, and it creates an energy that is living on its own. And it becomes its own entity. That also falls under that. So, I also liked how they talked about what spirits can actually do and what they can't do. Because I feel like that's important. Because so many times, for instance, yes, they can cause you harm. But most aren't going to. There's also that belief in the other book that I read, The Witch's Guide to the Paranormal, which I also suggest reading too, that you kind of have to give them permission. Now, human spirits operate a little bit differently. They don't necessarily need as much permission as like inhuman spirits do. So yes, they can maybe throw something at you. was it intended to hurt you, or was it intended to communicate with you, and that was the only way that they could do it? You gotta decide that for yourself. They can throw stuff, they can push, they could potentially scratch you. The authors of this book say that most of the time it's not intentional, but the way that spatial awareness works past the veil is not as clear cut. Like, it's not, if I were to touch this camera right now, I know the depth perception, I know where I'm at spatially, like the spatial awareness. Spirits don't have that same awareness. So when they throw something at you, it's maybe not meant to hit you, it's maybe meant to just let you know that they're there, but the precision and accuracy is not there. Let's just say that. I would be more worried about the mental stuff that sometimes comes with spirit interaction, especially if you're at all in tune with energy, and if you're an empath, good luck, because they're definitely going to get to you more so, because they can cause confusion, they can create hysteria and anger and grief, or any amount of negative emotion. And they can also sometimes turn people irrational. And this isn't to fearmonger, it's just to make you aware that oftentimes this happens accidentally as well, because they are trying to communicate to you what happened to them. And their only way of doing that is to sometimes make you feel what they feel, whether that's intentional or not. It's just trying to convey information, not necessarily to harm you. But it can be rather overwhelming and emotionally stressful for people that feel this. I know when we did, was it the Feliska house? It was that one or the other one we went to, where I could literally feel physical pain in my head because a man had shot himself in the head. You can feel emotions that are clearly not yours, and you kind of have to navigate that a little bit, and it can be a challenge, not gonna lie. Empaths are obviously going to feel it more. They're going to feel that emotional pain, and they're also going to feel physical pain as well at times, depending on how strong that spirit can come across. Now, there are spirits out there that will try to deceive you. It's like people. There are good and there are bad, and there's a vast array in between. And so there are some that are going to pretend to be more powerful than they actually are. Like I said, fear, panic, anger, all of these very strong lower emotions, that's what feeds these guys. And most of the time when the spirits are stuck in between the veil, they need energy to survive. That is what is going to prevent them from going into that dissolution faster. So they'll take any energy they can get. And depending on how broken down they are, depends on how desperate they are as well. So they'll either try and elicit sympathy or terror, one of the two. Now there are the spirits that are called demonics, and they're the ones that are generally what you think of as far as they don't have good intentions. They are not trustworthy. You want to try to generally stay away from them. They are going to mess with your emotional equilibrium as well whenever they can. They want to feed off your negative emotions because that's what gives them energy. And they are going to, they're assholes. They like to pick on you when you are in a very low mental state. That's how I got my attachment when I was just going through everything that I was going through, health-wise, divorce-wise. That's when I got my attachment, and it was pretending to be a spirit guide. And I didn't notice for a long time because my mental state was so low already. I just wanted it to be a helpful spirit, and I allowed it to be here for a long while until I finally caught on. So they will do that, and you don't always pick up on it at first. Alright, so as far as like spirits and their densities, there are different levels. You have Leloric, which is like fiery spirits, aerial, terrestrial, necromantic, loquacious, subterranean, and lucifugi, which means one that runs from the light. So you don't really want to mess with those guys. Letheric, associated with Jupiter. Spirits of storms, strong winds, and atmospheric conditions, appear with a middle stature, healthy and ruddy of human dimensions, quick-tempered, agitated, but can be cheerful and approachable. So this is like the absolute contradiction. They can be either one way or the other. They can be easily angered, but they can also speak gently to you, depending on their mood, I guess. They have noticeable anger, like russet color with lighter hued cloud around it. Rarely seen by humans. There's lots of pressure in the air when they're present. And they can be scary, but they often are generally giving joy and aid. Your aerial spirits are more likely to interact with humans. They're aloof and haughty. They take full advantage of loopholes. They resemble humans, larger and taller, very attractive, dignified, gentle aura about them. Maybe some golden red or rose gold sense of being in front of somebody like noble. And their orbs are citrus amber in color or golden. Their motion is a twinkling, sometimes blue-white light, if not looking directly. Looks like lightning. Will be noticeable rise in temperature. And that's another thing to note. Rise in temperature if they're, I guess these are kind of more non-human entities. So I guess they did mention these a little bit in here. I forgot about that. But if it's a human spirit, you're always going to feel that drop in temperature. That is like a signal of human spirits, is that drop in temperature. None of the other spirits do that. Now, some of the other entities can mess with like heat and like atmospheric pressure, but that cold spot sensation, that is a spirit coming through the veil, a human spirit coming through the veil. Terrestrial, most familiar, say like satyrs and pixies and imps. Large swelling clouds, soft dark or black in color. Rushing sound like a waterfall or like a stormy sea appearance of rainfall. Very curious, will show up for investigations. Spirits of nature, they gather in numbers. They love to prank and be kind of mischievous in nature. They're the ones that will interact with your technology to get some kind of impression out of you. They can have glowing red eyes that a lot confuse with more malevolent spirits. I don't know where the red eye thing and just being associated with evil, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they just look intimidating, but they actually aren't. Aquarius or Aquarius, I think it's Aquarius. I don't know what I'm saying. Aquarius would make a lot more sense because they're the marine spirits. So they used to be friendly with humans, but they have grown a lot more suspicious of us. They're ruled by emotion, so they will either be the most loyal spirits you can work with, or they will hold a grudge for eternity. They're fair and attractive in human form. They wear white or green with gold. Their nude manifest in a verdant hue with light yellow or gold near the top. Imitates a pulsing star-like energy. Can bring a joyful sensation. Is associated with Venus. Now, obviously, these, I don't know for sure. Obviously, these are how they come across for the people in Scotland. They may look a little bit different here. I don't have a lot of personal experience seeing these guys. Like I said, I feel things a lot more and I can hear them. I've said that probably a million times in these videos, but it's true. I don't always see things. Now, I could clearly see the orbs on that camera the other day I was looking at. They were literally flying around like in the most it was crazy. Like, you could very much so see them, and you could very much see the shadow figure kind of moving around too. Now, some people could blatantly see it. I saw it movement, but I didn't necessarily see a true form. I just don't always see them. I see light anomalies quite often, especially at the elms. I see that a lot. But I am not what you would say is like clairvoyant or like a medium. It's harder for, my senses just don't pick up like that. And honestly, I'm kind of okay with that because some of the things that are described, the energy is strong enough already, a very strong emotional energy. That sometimes seeing things just not necessary for me, because I probably would. It's easier for me not to fear things. Oh, also because I have so many great like reference books that of people that have been doing this a lot longer than I have, who just instill that thought of you can't fear them. The minute you fear them, it's going to be so much worse. You can have respect for them, and you can be stern, and you can interact in a way that you're comfortable with, but fearing them is like the worst idea possible. Oh, it's 11:11. Make a wish. I've been seeing 11:11 a lot lately. But anyway, so yeah, and just, you've got to have belief that you have things that are watching out for you. Call in your guides, call in your spirit team. I like working with the angels, to be honest. I have found that I don't think they really care if I'm true Christian or not. The Archangel Michael and Archangel Raphael, they're kind of like, I really love working with them. Michael is a badass, and Raphael helps with learning, and he helps with healing, and both I have worked with on different circumstances, and they've been immensely helpful. So, and I don't necessarily consider myself I was born and raised Christian, you know, so there's always that little part of me that connects with that. And honestly, while there's a lot of things that I don't necessarily see eye to eye with anymore, I don't have a problem with religion. I just don't necessarily see everything that they believe in anymore, if that makes sense. And but that doesn't mean that I have turned to work with saints before, and they're helpful. And yes, I don't mind saying a prayer, you know, I don't mind giving them that kind of energy, because they are still energies of goodness and general love, you know. And I feel like a lot of the times, I hate to say it, but when it comes to religion, it's not necessarily the religion itself, it's just been twisted by humans throughout time, and humans are incredibly flawed, as we know, and it's some of the people that I've run into along the way with very judgmental thoughts and not being open-minded. That's where I have a problem. So yes, there are still entities of that realm that I am happy to work with. They are extremely helpful, and they have bailed me out on numerous occasions, whether with healing or coming in on my behalf and helping to get rid of negative energy. I definitely feel like Archangel Michael has helped get rid of the spirit that was around here for a while. And I definitely know Archangel Raphael has helped me in regards to healing of different family members. So, but it just depends. Whatever you want to work with, go for it, you know. Whatever speaks to you and calls to you, you work with that. This video is going to be so long. Oh my gosh. I wonder if I should make a part 2, because this is going to be so long. We might make a part 2. Subterranean is next. So it's your traditional European dwarfs found in the deep earth. Smaller, like human forms, very powerful, but these guys can be a little bit tricky to work with, as well as to earn their trust. And I have heard that before too. They can actually be quite dangerous if you get on their wrong side. Their light is like flickering fire. Their sign is like lightning and thunder disturbing the space. Light appears around their heads like antlers, and it corresponds with Mars. So yeah, no wonder they're a little bit maybe hot-headed at times. And then you have your Lucifigi, which is a fun word to say, but not a fun entity to mess with. Because this is what you would consider your typical demon of destruction. Like, they are just not going to have really any good inside of them at all. Now, some people that have worked with demons say that there are demons that are generally helpful in nature. I personally do not want to work with demons. They're too tricky, man. They're too tricky, and generally speaking, I feel like they don't have your best interest at heart. I can't say that for all of them. I'm just, because I have heard of other practitioners that work with demons, and they can be quite helpful. And they can definitely aid you in certain things. As long as you, I think more when it comes to demons, you just have to, like, know what you're doing. You have to, there's a level of deep respect, and there's this level of, you better follow through with what you're promising. Whatever agreement you make, you better follow through, because otherwise there will be deeper consequences, versus a more forgiving entity that if you're working with them and you screw up, they might be more likely to forgive you. And versus demons, they're a whole other ball game. So, but I can't say that they're all completely and absolutely evil, because I've heard of tons of practitioners and even listened to other podcasts and such where people work with these entities and they're fine. I personally not gonna go that route probably. That is where a little bit more of the suspicion comes into play, not full on fear, but definitely my confidence would be wavering. And in that particular circumstance, I feel like there are some that will take advantage if they can, and I just don't want to get involved in that, because me and my, we can just be a little aloof at times. You know, we have the best intentions, but our follow through is not always there. I'm not gonna lie. Chronic sickness plays a huge role in that, unfortunately. So my poor ancestors, bless their hearts, I wish I gave them a lot more of my time and attention, but it doesn't always happen. So I understand if they don't want to actually help me with anything. I want a relationship with them, but it's just, that's just how it is. So yeah, I stick to entities that are a lot more forgiving, because I'm not always there. We try, but we're not always there. But these guys will appear as like black clouds that shine almost with like an obsidian sheer to them. They generally appear as like slender and pale in appearance, or like a sickly yellow color. They're associated with like a strong wind feeling or like an earthquake, and they can sometimes leave like white in their presence. Like you'll see just white essence around them. Necromantic or human souls, a bright opaque orb like an intense white fire, usually a blue hue to it, a liquid human dimensions with a cold sensation attached to it. Speech is hoarse or whispery, gray or silver. Cloud, a sensation of fear or hair sticking up, the only spirit that drops the temperature. And so that fear sensation, they just come with a kind of uncomfortable feel. That's not necessarily their intention. That's just the sensation that they come with. And yes, I can attest to them being like blue in hue. I feel like at the Ohms, that is what we have. A lot of human spirits. I don't come across a lot of other things. I know in the past there have maybe been some of those other kind of energies. And I'm pretty sure there are a fair amount of land spirits and stuff there as well. But majority of the time, I feel like it is human spirits that are there. And you just see a lot of blue pinpricks of light that are just, you'll see them out of the corner of your eye, or you'll blatantly see them in your third eye. I get a lot of shadow kind of stuff that happens right along. Sometimes very distinct, where you see like this shadow run across the room. I know I've mentioned that before. Sometimes, depending on their mood or how strong they are, sometimes they can knock things off. I have had a cabinet open on its own and have things spilling out of it. I have had other employees tell me that things have been thrown at them. So yeah, here and there. And it definitely depends on what's going on. So, for instance, certain things will make spirits more active. For instance, like a thunderstorm, spirits will come inside for that. And I do notice that on like super rainy days or thundery days where the atmospheric pressure is just stronger, I feel like the spirit activity is amplified. So I've noticed. Yeah. Anyway, and then you also have like your fae, so they talk about those a little bit. So you have your Seelie and Unseelie. They're aerial spirits, obviously. They migrate with the 4 seasons and the festivals. They pass rulership to like the next wind. Seelie described as shining, fair-haired, tall, haughty, and self-interested. Unseelie are sedimentary more so, and they are a little bit more sympathetic towards us humans. And they tend to live near the water. Alright, so the last section I will probably go over, and then I'll make a part 2 just because there's so much information in regards to this. And I like talking about it because it definitely breaks things down a lot more than just, oh, this is a spirit and I interacted with them here and this is what they did. This is like deep information about spirits. So you have your necromantic classifications, and so these are going to be your human human entities that were alive at one point, and they have now become disincarnate souls. And you have like different kinds. So you have your lairs, and there's 2 kinds within that. You have your regular and your familiar. Your lairs are restful dead, so they're completely passed over, which is what you want to be. You want to completely pass over because I feel like a lot of the time spirits hang around because they want to make sure that their families are okay. You know, they want to make sure everything is copacetic before they leave. But even when you've passed over, you can still come back and like watch over them. So you want to completely pass over. They're able to come back in physical form temporarily when they are needed. And with them, this is a very calming presence. Like you can tell a difference just by listening and feeling the spirits and what kind of emotion they invoke in you. Because these guys are very calm because they're your loved ones have fully passed on. You know, they don't have that confusion. They don't have the pain and suffering. They're at peace, and that's the best way to be. They don't need to reincarnate at this point, and they have learned all that they need from Earth. So they are like your guardians and saints and messengers. So these guys are like high up on the totem pole. Lairs can protect against harmful spirits and function as spirit workers and guardians. They bring with them feelings of clarity and comfort. Familiar lairs have passed through the gates of death, so they have moved on past that like in-between stage. So they have fully passed on, but they are waiting to be reincarnated again. So these guys could definitely be like your family members. If they haven't lived all the lives that they need to live, this could be them. But they can still come back and communicate through different symbols and tokens, or they can appear to you in your dreams. They may touch or whisper to you at times. They can retake spiritual form to visit, offer guidance and comfort, and share in special events. I'm sure a lot of people can attest to if they've had family members pass away before like a major event, like a wedding or, you know, something like that, where you just sense their presence. Or some people will even smell like their perfume that they used to wear, or there's just like this very distinct thing that ties that family member back, you know, like we've all had those moments before that are just, you just know that they are there and that they are looking out for you still. Yeah. They can also help the newly deceased. So I don't know about you, but when I pass over, I definitely hope I've got a family member or, some kind of powerful, helpful spirit that is going to help me get over to the other side. So then you have revenants, which, like I said, these are your unquiet spirits. These are the guys that get stuck and they can cause some issues, not necessarily on purpose, but it's just when you're in between, things are confusing. They can be dangerous at times just because they can become very desperate to get phasma and seek it any way they can. Memories become very corrupted. That's why sometimes they just don't remember who they are or what they're doing there. Sometimes they don't even realize they're dead. They can turn into kind of predators, hunting other spirits and sometimes the living just to maintain enough energy to survive and to maintain that phasmic body. They can turn into what's called larvae, which are very savage and irrational spirits. This is pretty much where their humanity is gone. But these are like the most rare to come into contact with. Like, you're not going to come across these very often. These are the ones that I feel like are oftentimes confused as like demons, but very, very, very rare. Then you have mains, which are benign spirits. These guys know that they are still there. They have chosen to stay behind for one reason or another. They are aware of their situation. They can be very beneficial. These are like going to be your most common ones that you come in contact with. Then you have in-mains, which are kind of the negative version of mains. So these are non-benign spirits, and they're often in distress. So this, I feel like, is kind of like that level below, where they're starting to kind of break down a little bit. These guys are often like traumatized from events of their life. So they're very much going to appear in whatever trauma that might have ended their life. They are also kind of just lost and confused in general. They're kind of unresponsive to communication, or they respond very unpredictably and kind of very unclear. And they can have bewildered actions at times. They will appear in the way they remember themselves, like I mentioned, and this can be the trauma that they face, so they can appear kind of scary. They can also be associated with like just a very strong memory that they were attached to too. So not always bad, but most likely there is some kind of trauma involved. Then you have your lemur, which is just above the larva. So these guys, they enjoy causing fear or deceiving their victims into giving them phasma. They have the ability to communicate with us, but often will get aggressive or evasive if confronted. They are afraid to move on due to thinking that something bad is going to happen to them once they do. So maybe they didn't live the most honest, best life, and so they fear passing on because they think that they're going to have some kind of very intense punishment once they pass the gates of death. And then larvae, they've completely forgotten their human form. They can be rather savage and aggressive at times. They will go after phasma in any manner that they can. Mostly will hunt down other lost souls. So generally speaking, they'll go after them first. They're only concerned about survival at this point. And they're at that last level of survival, to be honest. Their humanoid form is abnormal, so that's why oftentimes they're perceived as something darker and more powerful, because they just look so disformed. They cannot plan on coming into our world, but get here sometimes by accident. So like I said, they just happen to run across some kind of tear in the veil and get here. Their occurrence is rare. So lairs, their stage, they no longer need to reincarnate. Their communication is through dreams, symbols, and direct thoughts. Their form, they choose how they are going to appear to us. And their resource, they don't need our phasma. They don't need anything of substance. They are fully passed on. Familiar layers, they are on the path of reincarnation, but they can still come through us through dreams, symbols, and direct thoughts. They can appear in a way that we recognize them, so our loved ones. And they don't need substance either. They have fully passed on. Then you've got the mains, which are tending unresolved matters, generally speaking. Communication can be reasonable and communicative. They're generally intelligent. Appearance reflects memories of themselves and rely on ancestor rights or available phasma. Which is also why sometimes it's important to have those ancestor rights and to, we can help give energy to spirits who need it in a healthy, controlled manner. Then you've got the inmates, trapped in delusion, maybe unaware of death. Their communication is very emotional and erratic, oblivious of their actions. They just don't really necessarily know what they're doing. Their form is going to be whatever form that they're fixated on, and they are dependent on our phasma. Lemurs attempt to stay in the Korth Agra indefinitely, which is obviously not where they belong. Their communication is deceptive, incite emotion to gain phasma, so these guys are a little bit tricky. Their form can learn to manipulate their appearance. So those are the guys that will try to appear as something else to elicit more fear and terror so that they can get energy. They are going to be predators and scavengers of phasma. And then your larva is completely losing sense of humanity. Communication is completely irrational. Involuntary bestial qualities and features, and instinctual predators that feed on each other and other lost souls. Alright, so I think I am going to... Oh, well, that's kind of important too, isn't it? Okay, we're going to go through one more little section here because it involves the Lars and all that kind of stuff. So, like with Lars, there's different sensations attached to each level. So there's a subtle sense of alertness, and there's a presence. It feels like amiable. EMF, there's no like electromagnetic changes involved in that. Temperature, there's no symptoms. They move naturally through the metacosmos. Appearance, choose the time and place they appear. They may project an image of themselves. Activity is subtle and deliberate, and they may leave like recognizable signs. Communication is aware and intelligent. Often communicate in thoughts and dreams, and know more than they knew in life. So that'll be a dead giveaway too. They're a lot more wise and understanding. Revenants, their sensation is going to come with paranoia and like the sense of breathlessness and possibly a sense of dread. The EMF is erratic electromagnetic or compass readings. Temperature, hair bristling, isolated cold spots. So your cold spots. And it's going to be about like a 5 degrees difference as far as Fahrenheit and 2.8 degrees Celsius. Appearance is reliant on a source of phasma to maintain their form. They may learn to shape their appearances if they want to. Activity connected to a specific place, person, or object, and they may be rather erratic. Communication varies depending on classification. Knowledge is limited to former life and current state. Revenants, which include the inmates, lemur, and larvas, pretty much anything that can cause a little bit more distress. They are going to bring that emotional heaviness with them. They can bring headache, shortness of breath, constriction in muscles and of the chest. People who suffer from EMF exposure might have a hard time with these guys. Also be aware of EMF exposure because some people can actually just be affected by that energy, because that can include anxiety, headache, impaired cognitive function, nausea, overwhelming fear and dread, paranoia, shortness of breath, and vomiting. Treatments are going to be just moving away from the source of EMF, breathing very deeply, cup your hands to prevent hyperventilation, and sit by like running water, because water is a great source of just clearing things out. It's very good energy-wise for cleansing a space. Okay. I think I'm going to stop there and then make a second video. That way This isn't going to be like a 2-hour video because you might not have the time to watch that. So this is part 1. We're going to go into part 2 here in a little bit, and I'll release that video. Hopefully you've been enjoying this video and learning some stuff. I just feel like it's so important to understand like the rooted concepts of spirits, and I love talking about spirits. I really do. It's one of my favorite things to kind of study and investigate, and I wish I could go to more paranormal spots and do more stuff like that, and maybe someday I will. I actually have been looking into some groups around the area that do more like paranormal investigating and stuff. And of course, then just the spirits I get to have interactions with on a daily basis. So yeah, as always, be kind, stay curious, always speak your truth, and I will see you for part 2 here in just a little bit. Bye.